Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, happy Halloween, happy Monday. Hope you're having a good one so far. So I wanted to get in today's episode as quickly as I could, number one, because it was live testimony today and everybody opted in. So I was able to keep up much quicker. And also, I want to have some fun tonight. So let's get to it real quick. I want to give a big thank you to this list of people. Janet, for your super generous donation. Wendy, Kimberly, Shelly, Bex, Chrissy, Debbie, Just a Girl, PSU Baby, JC, and Anonymous, and everyone who bought merch. Appreciate you guys so much. Song fact of the day. Got to give a shout out to Becky Boo for giving me this. I did not know it. But at the beginning of Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith, Steven Tyler used a sugar packet instead of maracas to get that little sound in the very beginning. I listened and now I can totally hear it. All right. So a couple of things real quick. A few people seem to be a little concerned about how this is going to work to get death off the table. So the deal that the state made with Jake is that if he testifies according to what they expect him to testify to and to their liking, they will remove death off the table for George and Billy. Angela pled guilty, 30 years straight sentence, doesn't get out early. Jake will go to prison for the rest of his life. But technically, it's still on the table for George and Billy. There was something said at the very end of the hearing last week where the defense asked if the state wanted to go ahead and take it off. And prosecutor Angela Canepa said that they would talk about it, but privately. So do I think they'll take it off? I do. I mean, he did have some discrepancies in his testimony versus what she said in her openings, which largely came from him admitting to the murders and what he said in his proffer. But ultimately, this case against George, from what I've heard, is the weakest out of all four. So I think a conviction largely depended on Jake's testimony. And it's going to be, whether or not the jury finds him credible. And I think that they will when it comes to George's role. I don't think that the whole he didn't know until the phone rang the next day excuse will fly. It's just knowing how close this family is. So that's kind of the way it is. I'm sure it'll be taken off, at least for George. But I did a little bit of sleuthing this weekend, and I found some photos online on the Wayback Machine of some old social media stuff with mainly Angela, but I think I may have shown this picture before on the left, and I'll put the link in the description for all these pictures for those of you who are just listening. But on the left, we see just a really weird to look at picture now of the Rodens and the Wagners, some of them arm in arm. Everybody's close to each other at George's wedding with Tabby. And it's just very odd to see that now because all of the Wagners in there would be responsible for the murder of everybody in that picture except for Tabby. So, and on the right, we have a picture of what I think is Hannah Mae, maybe around the age of 14, close to 15 with Jake. They're dressed up going to, I think I remember a while back when I found this, it was a school dance, obviously for her. But it's just really weird. You do see the youngness in Hannah Mae in this picture. I don't think she's pregnant here. I could be looking wrong, but I really don't. I think maybe this is before she got pregnant, but it's clear he's much older than her. And, as you get older in your 20s and 30s, a few years age gap isn't a big deal. But when you're 13 and he's 17, definitely. So the other thing that I found was some pictures of what is still up on Angela's Facebook. There's just, it's all selfies. There's a picture of a little, a little stream, and then a pink Little Tykes storybook cottage twin bed for sale. And then her Pinterest, which I thought was really funny. And I don't have that up. Oh boy. But on her Pinterest, she had one thing. You know how sometimes you maybe don't mean to pin something? She had a board on there, and it was about the Wagners moving to Alaska, the people of interest in the murders of the Roden family, and it had a picture of her family in Alaska. I don't think she meant to put that there. All right, so day 33, we're on, and we had a shoe expert, William Bodziak. I've seen him on Forensic Files. This dude is really well known in the field of shoe impressions and tire impressions. I think I've seen him on Forensic Files a few times. So he is a forensic consultant and examiner for footwear and tire impressions. He's been doing this since 1973, so I think he definitely knows what he's talking about. He's written 3 books about footwear impressions that are used for teaching, and he testified actually in the Oklahoma City bombing trial as well as the O.J. Simpson trial. He also travels all over the world and has done some international big cases. For O.J., he identified the brand and the size of the shoe and the style of shoe that he was wearing from prints at the crime scene. They never could find those shoes, but after the trial, they did find photographic evidence of O.J. wearing those shoes. So to make comparisons, there are 4 areas of the bottom of the shoe known as the outsole. And that's number 1, the design itself on the bottom. Number 2, the physical dimensions of the outsole. Number 3 is general wear, which, as we know, our shoes, kind of the friction erodes the bottom of the shoe. And then it doesn't matter with some people the way you pronate or where you distribute your weight. You may buy 15 types of shoes, but you may always have that little wear down spot in one little place. And then you have the RAC, which are the randomly acquired characteristics. So it could be anything that the bottom of the shoe acquires, such as gum, a scratch, or a divot that can make that print unique. There are 2 different types of impressions you can get. You can get 2D and 3D. So 3D is things like a print in the soil, in the sand, in the snow. 2D can be from dust, could be invisible to the naked eye until you squirt something on it. It could be from blood, things like that, coatings of dirt. So the impressions are preserved depending on if they're 2D or 3D, and they're always photographed first using a ruler along the impression. So later that can be enlarged and they can look at it at the actual size it was found at the crime scene. For 3D, you've probably seen this if you watch any crime shows, a cast is made. For the 2D, they can use like a gelatin or static lifter to get that impression. With blood, they use chemical enhancements where the chemicals darken the blood to help make that print stand out. And that the chemical they used here was leucocrystal violet. It has hydrogen peroxide and it turns the impression purple to enhance that print for collecting it. It can show impressions also that you don't see with the naked eye. So you may spray that as kind of like luminol, I guess, for blood, where it just makes it stand out. So he's in private practice, but when people who study footwear impressions are making a determination of the brand and size of shoe, they can refer to a database, which is kind of like a CODIS system for DNA, where you have all of these different brands of shoes and the unique tread patterns are there. Most shoe companies tend to cooperate with law enforcement with this. And so for him, you can go to a local store if you don't have access to that or it's not in the database. Once the brand is established, you get samples from either the store or the manufacturer of the shoe. Once they get the shoe, they start with just a side-by-side impression, which helps to confirm or exclude that was the shoe worn at the crime scene. So then they do test impressions for a physical comparison. If it matches, you keep going with wear patterns and the texture of the shoe. So in the photo that I'm showing on the screen here, he shows a comparison of a K-Swiss shoe, showing that size determines how many identifying factors change the bottom of the shoe. So essentially, the larger the shoe, you're going to have more of a certain pattern because the shoe is longer. If the foot is shorter and the shoe is shorter, then you're going to have less. So you can see that on the left and right here. And then He shows the Walmart shoe and he talks about the texture of this Walmart shoe. And steel dye tips are applied by hand. And he actually showed a video of artisans who are striking by hand the rubber in the mold, which can make unique markings on the bottom. So when you fill that mold with rubber, you get that textured pattern. And so he was given the lift impressions and floor cutouts with the footprint. That came from, some of those prints came from Chris Sr., some came from Dana's. And he took his own photo of the impressions and reviewed the images and the photos from the crime scene. He went to a local Walmart himself, and they still had that exact shoe in a 10.5 and 11. He took images showing the texture of some of the impressions, and he bought 3 different pairs to compare. So with the size photo, he shows how different texture can be on the bottom of different sizes from hand-struck stippling is what they call it. So if you look on the left here, you see a little gap where that green arrow is on the top. And then on the right, on the left is an 11 wide. The right is a 10.5 wide. So you see there that the tread is very different because it's a different size shoe. And he also talks about, these are the shoe impressions, by the way, from the scene. He's demonstrating how he overlaid some things with the photo from the crime scene to confirm these were the Walmart shoes. Then in one impression, there was some slippage. He was not able to get a really good impression of that. Slippage could be just that the shoe slid. It could be that there was blood that was slipped on or anything like that. Then at Dana's, there was a linoleum impression, and it was similar to the Walmart shoes as well. They took that stuff up out of the floor. So cross-exam was pretty predictable. He can't say for certain George was wearing those shoes. So defense attorney Nash was up for George's side and says, you were able to determine the size and the brand. And he said primarily the size, the brand had already been provided to him. So the witness reviewed the BCI agent's report, and the defense attorney Nash asked if he's looked at for discrepancies in her report that was given to him. And he said no, he did his own independent report, and essentially he wasn't there to review what she did. He was told it was a Walmart brand, and if he was asked to determine a brand of shoe, would he look at the database first? He said if he was in public practice, yes, but being private, he doesn't have access to that. And the defense says law enforcement has one, and law enforcement was not able to find this shoe in their database. That was testified to earlier when the girl who works for BCI actually went out looking for those shoes and found them at the Walmart. So the defense says if it's not in the database, you can't determine the brand. And he said you can in some cases. So then he talked about what they call open source molds. And what that is, that are companies that make molds and sell the outsoles to smaller companies. So it's not unique to a brand. For instance, Nike would not do this. They would not go to a mold maker and say, we need molds for our Nikes. They make their own, but smaller brands may. And I don't know. Okay, so we'll get to it. Defense says that's the problem. If it's a non-proprietary sole, you can't conclude. And the witness says he bought the shoe from Walmart because it matched the impression. So the defense says we saw the video of the artisan tapping out that impression, and if the outsole is sold to other companies, it would be the same. And he said, well, yeah, it could. The defense hands him what is a copy of the witness and a colleague's slides from a workshop that he did a long time ago at a teaching event. And there's an image showing him a photo of the outsole of a shoe he bought years ago from Walmart to demonstrate certain things, which at that time was to demonstrate the texture on the bottom of the shoe. The next photo from this 8 to 10 years ago, I guess, talk that he gave with this it shows a similar design to the Walmart shoes that Angela bought, but the manufacturer is different than Walmart. It's a starter brand shoe. So the defense essentially thinks he's got him trapped in a corner and says, we just determined this is an outsourced sole. The witness says the source of the outsole comes from a mold that could have been used by other brands at any time. He didn't see any logos in the impressions that he had. And the defense says when there's a big open area on the bottom of the shoe, that could be where another brand puts their logo. And the witness says, yes, exactly. That's what happens. So the defense shows him the shoes that has a logo, and the witness says the logo could have been worn off, and left at any of the crime scenes. Although I'm not really sure why the defense is going here. We're going to have Angela on the stand maybe by Wednesday, and she's already admitted that she bought these Walmart shoes specifically for the murders. Jake has confirmed she did that, and they found the receipt. And I know you've got to do your job as a defense attorney, but we already have two people admitting that these shoes were bought specifically for the murders. So defense attorney Nash also says he was given 2 foot tracings of the suspects. And the defense says, can you tell us with scientific certainty that George Wagner left those impressions at the crime scene? And he just said, in summary, no. On recross, the prosecution asked, when did you use that starter shoe? He said 8 to 10 years ago. And the prosecutor says the logo, this is Prosecutor Canepa, by the way, the logo wasn't present at the crime scene. And he says no. So that's where I really, because apparently we had kind of thought all these years that this shoe impression evidence that they had was the biggest evidence they had against George. I wasn't blown away by it, to be honest. I've seen this presented in a much more incriminating way in other cases that I've covered or watched on Forensic Files. But I do think ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to come down to if the jury finds Jake and Angela credible, which I think the way Jake described that night of the murders, it's credible enough to secure a conviction for George. We shall see. But yeah, juries always make me nervous because there can always be one. You never know, guys. I'm always a nervous wreck when I'm on verdict watch. All right. So next up is Agent Scheider again. And he met with the victims' families before working with Jake on a plea deal. They'll do that. They'll go to the families and make sure they're comfortable if they were to get a plea deal. Hey, are you okay if we take death off the table? If it helps us secure convictions for this person, that person. And, most of the time families trust what their prosecutor is telling them. But on April 17th and April the 19th, he participated in the proffer with Jake. So he was there as Jake confessed. And as a result of information that Jake gave him on that meeting at the 17th, they executed the search warrant at Flying W Farms. So at the farm, they had BCI, people from the prosecutor's office, Pike County Sheriff's Office, Franklin County Dive Team, and the Ross County Sheriff's Office. By the way, this was April 18th of last year, 2021, when this search was executed. Jake told them where the murder weapons were located on the farm inside that pond. As we know, it was put on a geese house that evidently had sunk by the time BCI got out there. They retrieved the buckets filled with concrete, and that was weighing down that geese house. They were photographed and x-rayed and then sent to BCI London, and that went to their firearms lab. They were asked if they could remove the concrete, and if so, what could they do with the firearms that we know had been sawed apart and burned and thrown in there. So have no fear. Epic beer dude Matthew White took care of that, and he's coming up on the stand later. They also looked for the truck they bought for the murders, and they did find that truck at the home of Bobby, which is Uncle Bobby to Jake and Billy. I'm going to throw this up really quick. So they went to Uncle. If you remember, just to backtrack, the morning of the murders, before the sun even rose, Billy was over at Bobby's house giving that truck to his niece. So they said, BCI said that on April 21st, 2021, they found the truck at Uncle Bobby's. The entire family was super cooperative with BCI and gave them the title of that truck. There we go, guys. Sorry about that. It was not in working condition and it had not been for a few years. Jake told them some specific things in the bed of the truck. And the title issue, as we know, was April 27th or 22nd, 2016, from Silas Wagner to Katie Wagner. So that is George's niece. So next up, we had Lieutenant Ed Schilling, Franklin County Dive Team member. So at the shoreline, before they even got started, they saw a bucket that had a chain attached to it. So the team just follows the chain right down to the water. And guess what? It's the concrete buckets. Okay. So essentially they bring all that up. And then that's when Matt White comes in. I did not put his little picture on the side. I didn't update my overlay. Sorry, guys. So he had to get multiple hand tools to disassemble this concrete. He used hammers and wedges and the end of a maul to strike along lines that he had put on there to break that concrete up the safest way he could without tearing, any of the murder weapons up. So that's what he had to work with right there, guys. All right. So once he broke through and got to the center, he saw a grip and a barrel. Inside these concrete buckets, once they were broken up, they found the 1911 Walther Colt gun, barrels, a Glock magazine, cartridge cases from the SKS, 22 long rifle ammo, a cut barrel, a flashlight. He cleaned the items and he found a bunch of 9mm Luger rounds. Two different brands were present. Also, the red tip that was found at Chris Sr. and Gary's scene, as well as Kenneth. You can see that kind of in the top leftish corner of the screen. And he said the 7.62 rounds, which were the heaviest that he has ever come across in his career, which is interesting. So he compared the 7.62 round cartridges from Peterson Road from the well that they found there to the fired 7.62 from the concrete. They were a match. He found 55 .22 long rifle cartridges in one cartridge case in the concrete. So then he found part of a flashlight welded to the end of a barrel, which he said is consistent with a homemade silencer. And so what he did is he took a cast of that barrel to help him see the caliber, the lancing grooves, and found out that this was from a Beretta gun. If you remember, Jake said that he destroyed that Beretta when they were doing a little trial and error making these homemade silences. So he shows and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see here the section of the barrel is cut. And this has the chamber with it and a locking block assembly. Y'all, I'm not a gun expert. Don't ask me what this means. The locking block is specific to the Beretta 9mm. Then he showed a photo of the gun once it was separated and showed the slide was actually cut. It had been burned, and they found a thread adapter, which allows you to suppress the barrel. So they also found the 1911 Walther Colt that Jake used to kill 5 of the 8 victims. You can see on the screen here, middle picture on the bottom where they cut it. And then the fired casings from Dana's to the test fires from the Walther Colt were essentially the same. And it was the same deal with the Glock. He was able to use the slide portion of that Glock to fire a bit of it, and then it matched. So that was kind of it. Today was not an exciting day, really, compared to last week. We got a little spoiled last week with having such explosive testimony. Today was sort of just a lot of gun talk, a lot of ballistics talk, and footwear impression talk that I thought to me was just underwhelming. I think the defense kind of nailed it when they said, can you say with scientific certainty that George was wearing those shoes? And he said he couldn't. The one thing to point out too is where Angela said in her openings that George was standing inside Dana's house is not where Jake said he was standing. So there's been some discrepancies about that, but we shall see tomorrow. The firearm epic beard dude will continue testifying about putting these weapons back together and tying them to the murders. I think Julia's back up tomorrow. I'm hoping maybe that could be some wiretaps. We're supposed to hear those this week. That will be very interesting. So I will break all that down for you. Thursday, I have to go out of town for a couple of nights. So I'm going to hope to get one out Thursday as soon as I can. Friday's testimony, I will bring to you Saturday. So I'll still get it in, but Friday's testimony is going to be a day late. I got to run down to the beach house for a couple of days. But anyways, yeah, so nothing too explosive today, but we're going to do it, even if it's not scandalous and, just amazing revelations, because it all fits. And these are the very weapons that you see that murdered 8 people. And it's just amazingly sad, even down to the fired cartridges. Remember, because Jake would go pick all these up. The time and planning they put into these murders blows your mind. All right, guys. Well, have a good one. Have a happy Halloween. Stay safe. I hope it's dry where you are. It has been a wet one here, so I'm hoping there's a break in it so the kids can get their Halloween in. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.